Hey, good afternoon, everyone. I am in my home here in Sarasota, not at my office where I typically do my lives uh, if I'm not out and about. And yeah, wanted to come on here and share a few thoughts I had about the upcoming hurricane and the suffering that people are experiencing right now due to the last hurricane as well, Helena. Um, so the title of this video is "Storms." A storm is coming, and so I've always heard either you've just come out of a storm, or you're in a storm, or you're about to go into a storm, and that's certainly how it feels like here in Florida, and literally a storm. But I know a lot of you are facing storms of life, not a literal storm like a hurricane or a tornado or a flood. And so I just want to have a little conversation about how to face a storm. Um, I certainly am not. I am very mindful of people that are going through a real storm right now, and we're facing one right now. I mean, Hurricane Milton is definitely coming on to land here in Florida. We don't know exactly where it's going to hit, but it looks like it's going to be somewhere really close to Sarasota. And so I'm not going to lie and say that I'm not worried. I'm not anxious. I'm not, but I do want to share with you how you can have a different view of how to face a storm, both literally and figuratively. You can face a storm like this, like Hurricane Milton or Helena, with fear and anxiety and get all bent out of shape. But it's all perspective. And I want to share with you two different perspectives that you can actually choose to look at. And yeah, while right now there are people in North Carolina and still in Siesta Key, just 8 miles from my house, that are still going through a really, really trying time. I drove through there Saturday, and it was just heartbreaking to see all of the people's stuff lined out on the roads, and all of Sarasota County. They're not even picking up trash today because all of the trucks are going out there trying to remove the debris before this next storm comes along. So you can certainly be in the middle of a storm and be facing another storm, and that's kind of how it seems here in Sarasota. But I created a infographic back during COVID. It was actually while I was sick with COVID. If you remember, I got my first round of COVID fairly quickly because I was traveling so much. And it really, that was the first set of COVID. And, well, to be honest, we didn't know whether we were going to die or live. If you listen to the media, we're all going to die. Um, but I was worried because, my speaking career was over at that point. So I thought, because, nobody's going to want to be, the more we got into COVID, the more shutdowns happened. And remember social distancing and yeah, just all of the terms and the separation and the anxiety that came with that. And so I didn't know how I was going to be making a living, because primarily I was making a living speaking. And I realized that, we're probably not going to be speaking for a very long time. So I had to face that storm, and I had a choice to make. And I remember feeling like I was going down a choice that I didn't like. I didn't like the way it was making me feel. I didn't like the way I was feeling about it. I was very anxious. I was very not optimistic. And those of you that know me know that I'm very optimistic, and probably to a fault at sometimes. Like, if I thought about it, of course it's going to work out. Like, why wouldn't it? I thought about it. Like Zig Ziglar used to say, I'll go fishing and take the tartar sauce with me because I'm going to catch a fish. And if I don't, I drive to the market and buy a fish. Okay. So we'll get a fish one way or the other. That's the way I am. I'm very optimistic. But facing COVID, I was like, this is it. This is how I go down. And it was tough, but we had to pivot, we had to change, and we had to learn new ways. And Zoom is one of the ways that we learned to pivot. And so, as I was sick with COVID, and I think God just gave me this idea to kind of help myself through it. And I realized at that moment I have a choice. I can either face my storm with faith, or I can face it with fear. And so I started thinking about what happens when I face it with fear, and I was facing it with fear. Pretty soon, anxiety started building, and so I started thinking about faith and what would happen if I would just say, I believe that God has a higher plan, that God has a plan in all of this. What would happen if I just have faith and face it with faith, not knowing what's going to happen, but knowing that God has a plan, and I'm not God, and I know you're not, and so so I chose to have faith. And so there's two choices: faith or fear. So I want to just show you the infographic that I created, and then kind of talk about it. And I want this to encourage you. If you're in Florida and you're facing this storm called Milton, and you've just gotten over Helene, or your children might be anxious, and you might be feeling like everything's just happening. I know it is. It's kind of like that. It seems like we need a break here, and we just need, we got elections going on, and there's high emotions around that. We've got, high interest rates, high prices, and storms, literally hurricanes and flooding, and Sarasota just got over a massive flood about, a month and a half ago. And then we had this Helene, and now we have this, and it seems like it's just happening. So here's the infographic. And so I want to go down the fear path, because most likely there's a lot of people that are going to be watching this video, and they're going to be going down the fear path. Now, fear, I believe, is a good emotion. It's a God-given emotion. Fear is meant to keep you alive. So in no way do I want to, minimize the fact that this storm, you need to respect it, and you need to take precautions, and you need to do what you can to make sure that you and your family is safe. So I'm not saying go out there and don't be fearful and just continue life. No, but fear is a God-given emotion that when you are in the presence of real live danger, fear causes you to move. It causes you to go back inside. It causes you to go to the right. It causes you to go to the left. It causes you to get away from danger. Fear is designed by God as an emotion to keep you alive. Fear is a good thing, but if not handled properly, it can lead to anxiety. And this is what I call the FAP principle, FAPP. Fear can lead to anxiety. Okay, so anxiety is it's basically it's taking what has happened in the past. And so I know I was talking to a guy at church yesterday, and he said, if it wasn't for the flood that they just went through and the Helene that they just came through, this hurricane probably wouldn't seem so dangerous and menacing. But it's because they're applying what's happened in the past, they're applying it to the future, and it impedes our present. So fear can lead to anxiety if it's not handled properly while it's in the fear position. Fear is meant to make you move. Okay? But if you don't move, pretty soon anxiety will build in, and anxiety is like paying rent on a house that you don't even live in. It's worthless. Like, I've never in my life heard anybody say, I'm so anxious about yesterday. It's always about the future. It's always about what could happen. If you're anxious about it, I promise you it hasn't happened yet. Okay? So anxiety is a killer. It's not a good thing. Anxiety is not a God-given emotion. Anxiety is something that humanity created because of what happened in the past. We put it in our future, and it keeps us from moving. In fact, anxiety leads to paralysis. It leads to us shutting down. It leads us to staying where we are. And that's not a good thing. When there's a real present danger, you need to move. Okay. And so fear, if not handled properly, we're going to get back on how to handle fear, but if it's not handled properly, it always leads to anxiety. And the Bible says, don't be anxious about anything, but in everything. So first of all, let me ask you a question. What is anything? It says, do not be anxious about anything. What is anything? Anything. Don't be anxious about Hurricane Milton. It's going to happen. You can't change it. You can't control it. You can only do what you can do to protect yourself, but don't be anxious. And the Bible says, don't be anxious about anything, but in everything. What is everything? Everything. In everything. As I was putting away my backyard furniture and making sure that there was no projectiles that were going to fly through the window, I had to think about that. I'm grateful that I have this stuff to put away. I'm grateful that I have a place to put it. I'm grateful that I have a house that is strong and able to, withstand this storm. So in everything, be grateful. I remember one time I was in Belize, and we were sitting around a campfire and enjoying the nice evening with friends, and all of a sudden we started hearing a loud noise and screaming, and we looked down the street and there was an orange glow, and so we ran down. It was a fire. It was one of the houses caught fire, and it was like a hut, and we were there at that hut earlier, that several days earlier, handing out food and supplies and stuff. It was a very poor community, and this hut, I remember seeing it prior, where you could actually see through it. It was like a straw hut, like a bamboo type hut, and it was a grandmother and three grandchildren that lived in a hut about the size of my living room, and they had a couple kitchen utensils and a couple of wooden chairs and a table, and that was all that they had. And in less than 5 minutes, that hut and everything they owned burned down. And I remember seeing the owner of that house, or the person that lived in that house, going around talking and smiling and she was just happy that her family was still living. That it was just a house, it was just a hut. And I'll never forget that, because she was not anxious about anything. And she was grateful for everything that she had. And she faced fear in the proper way, and it did not lead to anxiety. And anxiety will lead to paralysis. And when you're paralyzed, when you're paralyzed with fear, you're unable to move, and that's when paralysis will lead to you becoming prey, not Pray, but Prey. And so fear, if not handled properly, can lead to anxiety. Anxiety always leads to paralysis, and paralysis most times will lead to you becoming prey and being taken over by whatever it is. But there is another option. And I remember thinking about how I was quickly moving into anxiety and thinking that nobody's ever going to have a public event again. And I remember going down that path, and I was like, this is not where I want to go. And so anytime that you're on the fear path, fear, again, is designed by God to get you to move. It's designed to keep you alive. It's a good thing to have fear. People that have no fear usually end up dying young. Okay? Fear is meant to keep you alive, but it needs to be handled properly. And so when you have fear, it's the time to move, and it's time to move to faith. It's time to move to believing in something bigger than you. And so let's talk about the top track that you can face a storm with. You can either face it with fear and take the chance of it moving down the FAP principle: fear, anxiety, paralysis to prey. Or when you're faced with something, when you're faced with a storm, you can face it with faith, with belief. Faith always leads to anticipation. You look forward to something. I'm already looking forward to the other side of this storm. I'm looking forward to it. And so I believe that we are going to be okay. I've done everything we can to prepare, and I'm going to be able to help my neighbors and help the people in need, but I have faith that things are going to come out okay. Yeah, we might lose a tree, we might lose electricity, we might lose a roof. I don't know what's going to happen, but I have faith, and I'm moving ahead. I'm doing what I can to prepare for the storm, and I'm doing what I can to serve others. And that leads me to anticipation. It shows you the goodness of humanity. It shows you the goodness of neighborhoods and people caring for each other. And it leads to purpose. So faith leads to anticipation. You look forward to it if you believe in something. You look forward to it, you anticipate it, and anticipation always leads to purpose. Now, I don't know the purpose of the storm that you're facing in your life. I don't know the purpose of this storm that's coming to Florida. I don't know the purpose of the storm that of cancer. I don't know. I don't understand that. But in that storm, you have a choice to face it with fear or to face it with faith. Faith leads to anticipation. Anticipation leads to purpose. And here's the deal: if you're living, if you're breathing, if you're able to think, if you're able to process, you have a purpose on this planet. And so maybe you just need to start having faith so that you can start anticipating something bigger and better, a brighter future, a brighter, whatever, so that you can have that purpose. And purpose always leads to power. So I don't know. I would rather have power. I would rather have the power to move and to help and to grow and to push past my storms than to be paralyzed and become prey because of anticipation or because of anxiety and fear. Two choices. You can face your storms with either faith or fear. Now, I believe we're going to get through this. Okay, but at the same time, I'm doing everything I can to prepare. And so I don't want you to take this message as a message of, hey, let's just believe and not take any precautions. No, this storm is something real. It should cause fear, but fear should not cause anxiety. Fear should push you to faith, and that's what I want for you. Fear is a good thing. Fear this storm, but have faith. Faith leads to anticipation. Anticipation leads to purpose, and purpose leads to being powerful. Thank you, and God bless you.